morning. I'm Jeff Mason. Welcome to Let's Get Growing Facebook Live. We're in the greenhouse today. It's a little bit chilly outside, but it's rainy. I'm going to shut off this fan here. Hang on a second. All right, that probably helps with the noise a little bit. Lots of fans going in the greenhouse at this time of the year. Very, very important to keep the air circulating. When you get cool temperatures in a greenhouse, we try to keep the greenhouse as cool as possible. You couple a lot of plants in a cool greenhouse, you get a lot of humidity, and that adds a lot of possibilities of mildews and fungus diseases and stuff like that. So we keep the air moving. It's a good idea when you're growing indoors under lights and things like that too. Keep air circulating all the time. Anyway, speaking of growing indoors, we're going to look at a lot of different plant families over the winter for indoor growing. And one of my favorite families of plants, you always want what you can't have, and in our dry garden and things like that. Of course, I love ferns, outdoor ferns and indoor ferns. And indoor ferns are tricky to grow. Most of us don't have near the humidity levels in our houses that you need to keep ferns really happy. The greenhouse here, parts of it run about, I try to keep it dry, but we run about 70 to 80% humidity in many cases. And a lot of plants love it. It's a little too much for some plants, but we got to strike that balance. But ferns are one of those plants that in general like more humidity than many other house plants. Philodendrons, things like that, have that thick waxy leaf. You can get away with a lot lower humidity. But what if you've got normal indoor conditions, room temperature, lower humidity? You can augment the humidity a little bit, but not overall. What kind of ferns can you grow? Well, there are a lot of ferns you can grow in those conditions. And one of the traits of the ferns that you can grow in these conditions, I found, tends to be if they have fuzzy rhizomes, and if they're epiphytic ferns, meaning ferns that grow up in the branches of trees, and they have creeping rhizomes, they tend to be ferns that can take dry conditions, at least for a period of time, and then happier when the moisture comes back. I remember going to Florida for the first time and seeing the ferns that grow on the oak trees, and the trunks would be covered in these ferns, and you'd be there at a time when there was very low precipitation, and all the fronds would be dried up, and as soon as the rainy weather comes back, poof, they come back into growth again. So that tends to be ferns like this guy. This is a Polypodium formosanum from Taiwan. And it has that growth habit. Really thick, woody rhizome, and then leaves that pop out all along that rhizome. I can guarantee you that this exact plant has dried out dozens of times, dropped all its fronds. I realized it was dry, started watering, and it comes back to life. You can see there's lots of new little shoots coming along here. It's in a very active growth cycle. I'm keeping it well watered, and it's doing really, really well. So look for ferns that have these rhizomes. And one of the most popular ones is this guy here. This, of course, is the rabbit foot fern. And this is quite a nice specimen. As you can see, it's completely covered in these cool fuzzy rhizomes. That's why it's called the rabbit foot fern, because they got these fuzzy little rhizomes that kind of resemble feet. To me, they look a bit more like tarantula legs, but I think rabbit foot fern is probably a better selling name than tarantula fern. You get a lot more people wouldn't be creeped out by rabbit foot fern. But rabbit foot fern is one of those ferns, and it's just, if you look at this plant, somewhere in there is a 6-inch hanging basket. I have no idea where it is. I haven't seen it for years. But the rabbit foot fern is one of those ferns that can take the lower humidity. It can take low light in the house. In fact, I remember as a kid, we always had a rabbit foot fern hanging over the kitchen sink in the kitchen. The window was northeast, so it never ever had direct sun. It had whatever light was on in the kitchen, and it picked up a little bit of humidity every time the dishes were done or something like that. But that was it. Again, it's got those rhizomes that are almost like little storage structures, as well as being roots, that allow it and give you the hint that it's a fern that can take that dryness. And again, this one has dried out many times. When they do that, they will drop the fronds. But that's a normal protection trait of the plant. They'll drop the fronds to survive a drought period, and then when they're happily growing, they'll throw out all kinds of new fronds. So if you never let them dry out, great. If they do happen to dry out, it's okay. And if the humidity levels are low, you just don't get quite as robust growth, but they still will grow very, very easily. Like, look at this one. It's just growing like crazy. Keeps wanting to wrap itself around the pot, which is okay. I don't know if I'll ever have to put this into a bigger basket. Maybe. I might do that just for support. Sort of set this into a wire basket with nothing in it, and just let it colonize the frame of the basket just for some added strength, because eventually, I don't know, the basket in there's got to rot away at some time. I can't, like I say, I haven't seen the basket in years, but the fern is doing exceptionally well. This is probably one of the best ferns to grow indoors. It's relative, the one over my head. This is another rabbit foot fern. A little bit different though, in that its rhizomes aren't quite as showy. The plant is beautiful. It's a beautiful, very soft fern. It's the Vallia Fijiensis. The fronds are a little more stick-like. You can see them here, but treated exactly the same way. Easy going, and a beautiful fern that doesn't mind being in the lower humidity of the house and the lower light, which is important as well. Some ferns can take very dark conditions, and the rabbit foot ferns can do that. There's a few other ferns around, again, that have that fuzzy rhizome. This is an Aglomorpha. It's a beautiful fern. Just love it. And look at the rhizomes this thing gets. Just amazing. Big fuzzy things that are very spongy almost on the outside. They'll absorb a lot of moisture and allow the plant to hold moisture during dry time. So quite a beauty. Probably going to need a new pot soon, but that's okay. It's just all rhizome in there, but I love it. This Aglomorpha. And probably one of the easiest ferns for people to grow of this type is the Phlebodium aureum. I'm going to bring this guy out. He's got a few weeds in the pot, but not a big deal. You can see that he's actually starting to warp this 12-inch pot because it's so strong with its rhizomes. Gorgeous foliage. This is often called the kangaroo fern. And it's called the kangaroo fern. You can't see it here. I'm going to show you on a small specimen.
Yes, will it escape in Oshawa?
What's that?
Will it escape?
Oh,
in
yeah,
Oshawa?
the kangaroos in Oshawa. Holy cow. This is a smaller one, sometimes called the blue star fern. Has gorgeous blue foliage. big fuzzy rhizomes. You can see this one is just climbing out of this 4-inch pot. And if you think I've kept this 4-inch pot moist continuously, impossible. So you can see how good this fern is. Easy house plant. Really easy to get a hold of too, because you can get it anywhere where little small tropical plants are sold. It's never labeled, but blue star fern, blue kangaroo fern is what it's called. And it is a ridiculously easy fern to grow. So you can grow it. We put these outdoors for the summer, and they're just amazing. Indoors for the winter. If they start to get ratty like this, you just take those fronds off. Follow them back to the rhizome. Get rid of it. And you can just keep it looking really, really good. I've even had these where a point where they got too dry. A lot of the fronds were browned off. I literally cut every frond off and let them resprout from the rhizomes, and they're fantastic again. So super easy fern to grow indoors. Probably the toughest. Easy to grow. Like I said, look at how it's managing to grow in that pot. I don't even know how it's still alive in there, but a gorgeous thing. And so sturdy, they can go outside for the summer, drag them in for the winter, and just have a great time. Just a ridiculously easy fern to grow, and probably one of the best and most attractive ones. It's an interesting plant because sometimes you'll buy a bromeliad or you'll buy an orchid, and there'll be a tiny little fern growing in the pot with it. I'm sure these blue kangaroo ferns are the bane of tropical growers because they spread themselves around so easily. They actually will pop up like weeds in botanic gardens and growing greenhouses where a lot of orchids are grown and stuff like that. They'll just pop up like weeds. They're so ridiculously easy to grow. Then you can see on the bottom of them. Now remember, ferns, while they are plants, they are not flowering plants. Whole different branch of the plant family. They reproduce by spores. Spores are often held in interesting ways on ferns. On the blue star ferns, you can see the underside of the leaves are covered by these amazing patterns of fronds. I'm going to clip one off here and just show it a little bit closer. Look at the amazing pattern of spores that you get on the back of the fronds. Now, they're a long way from being a plant, but if I just do this, keep that ground moist, I would have this fern sprouting in the floor of the greenhouse. For me, it's just a very attractive part of the plant. But that is the spores. It's not bugs or anything like that. That's its seeds, essentially. And it's an easy one to grow from seed, and even a little weedy for growers and things like that. But great for us. Another one that you'll often see, and I really love these ferns. This is another one that's called a kangaroo fern, or it has the lovely common name of wart fern. It's called wart fern because where I don't know if I can see any spores at the moment, but where the spores are, you get these funky little warty bumps on the frond. So it's called wart fern. It again has a wide creeping rhizome. So there's your clue. Makes a good house plant. This one is in bad need of a cleaning, but I wanted to show you what the rhizomes do. Here they are here. Quite long, quite vigorous. This one is, oh, here we go. There's the end of it. It's trying to grow right, oh, I broke one. We'll talk about that in a second. Growing right out. In the tropics, they use these as ground covers, of course. You can imagine if you just let these rhizomes creep along the ground, they would make a beautiful ground cover. But again, Microsorum diversifolium, another easy to obtain and easy to grow fern that is quite beautiful and will grow indoors very, very well. Look at that, it's very lush growth. Nice black highlights on the stems, on the fronds. So another real beaut. Very vigorous, great to grow outside. Grown into mixed planters in the summer. We'll talk about that next summer. We'll do some planters with some ferns in them, but really beautiful. Now I broke that piece of rhizome off. So of course we can't not propagate these things. And these are really, really easy to propagate. You just take a piece of rhizome like that, put it in a pot. I don't even know if I've got a pot here. Oh yeah, I got one. Your soilless mix in there, tamp it down, take your rhizome, fronds are going up so you know that's the top, put it down into the pot, and just be sure that your rhizome is connecting to the soil. Put that in a high humidity situation until it roots. That's it. So easy to propagate. In a 6 months time, this will be full of plant. Maybe not quite that dense, but pretty close. Very, very easy to propagate. You can do any of these rhizomatous ferns this way. Add more to your collection, give them away to friends, whatever. Second group of really easy ferns for indoors are these guys that are hanging over my head here. I'm going to bring this one over from the side. Just get that guy out of the way. And these are the staghorn ferns. Staghorn ferns are a really interesting group of plants. This one's a little bit rough. Needs a few fronds trimmed off of it, but not a big deal. It's easy to do, and we'll talk about that in a second. The staghorn ferns are a really interesting group of ferns because they're completely epiphytic, so they hang in trees. Most of them are from Australia and that part of the world. They hang high in the trees and are quite adaptable to dry conditions. They're not jungle ferns. These things are 30 or 40 feet up trees, up out in the wind, sometimes out in strong sunlight, but also always in a place where moisture comes and goes. And when you get a fern like that, that is a good tip that it's probably going to do okay indoors. They can take dry conditions. They thrive on, drying out, getting a good soaking, drying out, getting a good soaking. What's neat about the platycerums or staghorn ferns is they have these really cool antler-like fronds. And then they also grow a frond that does this. So the fronds, these are old fronds here, and these are called shield fronds. You can see a new one's just starting right here. They're called shield fronds. And what they do, they grow from the base. This little shield frond is going to grow out. It's going to overlap the old frond and wrap itself more around this piece of wood that it's on. And that's how they hold themselves onto trees, but it's also how they produce their own growing medium. When they're growing like this, and the shield frond comes out, it forms almost a cup in the top. And what can collect in that cup is debris, plant debris. Look at little bits of plant are in there. Even the dead frond that's there, these old fronds, will eventually decompose, and that's where the plant's getting its nutrients. Water will run down the trunks of the trees, collect back in the frond, in behind the shield fronds, and that's where they'll get their moisture. So you can grow them on a plank like this quite easily. You can grow them in a pot as well. You don't have to grow them this way. You can grow them in a pot as well, and the shield frond will just wrap around itself. Quite effective as well. You can grow them in hanging baskets. If we look above my head here, we have this big jumbo guy. This is Platycerium superbum, and this is going to get to be a huge plant. And you can see this shield frond here that is just in active growth. And when it gets big enough, it's going to replace the one above it. The one above it's pretty ratty now. We're going to cut some of that back so it's not as ugly to look at. And we've got this nice, beautiful shield frond here that's going to take its place and get bigger. So those shield fronds have that job. That is to hold themselves onto trees, make themselves a pot, basically, where debris and water can collect, and that helps feed the plant. The fronds that stick out off of a staghorn fern are the fertile fronds, or fertile. How do you say that? Fertile? We'll go with fertile. They're the fertile fronds. That's where the spores are produced. And if you look at this one, I'm going to lift this up. I don't know, Laura, if you need to turn that up or not. If you look underneath here, you see this big brown patch underneath the fertile frond? Those are the spores being formed. That's all spores there that can be taken off the plant and grown on to make new staghorn fern babies. And that's pretty much how you have to propagate them. Dividing something like this would be nearly impossible, but growing from the spores is a possibility. It's not something I've done. We'll have to try and experiment with it and see how we do, but it's not something I've ever done, growing ferns from spores, but that is where you start. Just like the little round ones on the blue star ferns. Of course, this one doesn't have a lot of... Oh, here we go. Here's some. The little round circles on this guy. Big slabs of brown on this guy. Same thing. So these fronds, these fertile fronds, are temporary. Eventually they will dry up and fall off. And like this guy who's got a few ratty ones, you can actually just clean them up. Cut them right out. Get rid of the really, really bad ones. And it'll grow a whole new crop of new ones as it goes. I don't know if we've had any sporing on these ones. Doesn't look like it. A little bit of damage. But we can take those off and allow it to regrow a bunch more. But again, these staghorn ferns are very, very popular now. We're seeing a lot of really cool ones coming out of Taiwan, South Korea, Southeast Asia. Some of them are real big, like Superbum. I don't know, probably not many houses that you could keep that guy in, but there are lots of miniature ones coming available, and they are spectacular. With the houseplant craze of the last few years, we're starting to see stuff like these dwarf staghorn ferns come available. Probably the best place in our area to look for them is look for people that grow orchids. A lot of them will grow the staghorn ferns as well because they're compatible in their growth. Kim's Nature in Markham has several different staghorn ferns right now. Some really interesting ones as well. But if you're looking for that ferniness, if you love ferns, and you got to have them in your house for the winter and you don't have the best conditions, look for these guys. All very easy, all very rewarding ferns to grow in the house, and then outside for the summer, back indoors for the winter. They love that.
Sophie would like to know if you'll be selling the blue star ferns. Outside, would you put them in sun or shade, because she needs that plant?
The blue star ferns, I would grow them in dappled shade to shade. I don't think it would be really happy in more sun than that, but it's a stunning fern. Will we have? We'll probably have some available in the spring, but quite honestly, it is a fern you can find everywhere. Just look for little plants that have that blue lobed leaf. Like it's a really easy one to find. When they're babies, the leaves are not this divided. Your leaves might just be one sort of frond, but they'll be that distinctive powdery blue color, and you might have a little bit of a rhizome growing. Easy to find. We got to do some propagation on these because this one needs something done with it. So we'll probably take some cuttings of that and grow some out, but it is an easy plant to find, but very rewarding.
So Jeff, Paula would like to know if you could please share how to care for a Christmas cactus. How to make it bloom more often. Hers bloomed in August.
Christmas cactus, I don't think I have any in the greenhouse right now. We've probably got a couple up in the house. Christmas cactus are an interesting plant because they're a jungle cactus to start with. They grow up in the trees of the jungles with these ferns. So that gives you the first hint about how to grow them. We don't put them in full blazing hot sun. They do not like that. They prefer a dappled shade situation. If your stems they kind of look like leaves, but they're actually stems. If your stems start turning really red and looking sort of sunburnt or heavily tanned, you're probably getting a bit too much light. Reduce the light a little bit. Growth cycle. Lots of moisture through the growing season. Growing season is the spring and summer. We put them outside for the summer. They love it. There's no reason to keep them in the house if you've got outdoor places to hang them. Grow them all summer. Treat them like every other plant. Maybe keep them a slightly bit on the drier side. Make sure your soil's got good drainage in it so they don't stay too wet. Feed them, water them, let them grow. As you get into the autumn, you need to then start slowing down that growth. Give them a resting period. So about September, move them to a spot where they're not going to get rained on. You can allow them to get dry. Stop feeding them. Let them be outside in the cool nights, because cool nights certainly help. And that drier, cooler cycle tells the plant that it's time to bloom. It will then start to form flower buds in that cooler cycle, and we'll actually leave them outside into about the end of October and keep them on the porch covered, but on the dry side. That cool weather, that dryness triggers the plant to come into bloom. It'll start setting its flower buds. When you see the flower buds forming and starting to grow, you need to give it a bit of water then at that time, so you don't want the buds to blast or dry up. And then you can bring it indoors. Traditionally, the old-fashioned ones would bloom around Christmas time, which is why we call them Christmas cactus. Now, there are two species of Christmas cactus around. One of them is called the Thanksgiving cactus sometimes. One of them is called the Christmas cactus. Through breeding and stuff, they're all mixed up. It's hard to get the true species of either one. What you're getting is hybrids developed for the gift plant or the pot plant trade, where we get cyclamens and mums, things like that. And they can be timed very nicely to bloom when the grower wants them to, by withholding water, withholding light, changing the temperatures at different times of the year. They can get them to bloom almost whenever they want. But the nice thing about the hybrids now is that they are really easy to bloom and will often bloom in the fall, bloom in the winter, bloom in the late winter, and bloom again in the early spring. You could almost have them blooming from Canadian Thanksgiving to Valentine's Day, or even into St. Patrick's Day. Often, once they start their initial bloom cycle, they'll just keep flushing flowers out, which is great. So, average summer, cool, dry fall, bit of moisture back indoors for the winter should keep them going all winter long with flowers.
So here's one for you.
Okay.
You're going to have a hard time answering this. Paula says you have a great variety of plants, but what is your prized or favorite plant?
That's a really hard question. I do get asked from time to time. If I was living in a one-room apartment and had one windowsill, I don't even know what I would grow. My interests shift and vary on a regular basis, and I never get really attached very often to one plant for a very long time. But right now, what's in our apartment right now? We have Thai Constellation Monstera, which I just love. It's a beautiful plant. It's about 4 feet across. It's gorgeous. That might qualify. A nice big clivia, maybe a variegated clivia, might be nice too. But like I say, I can never peg myself down to a plant that would be the only one that I would grow, because if there was a square inch of space on the windowsill, I'd find room for another one. So I can't ever say
A true collector.
what my favorite is, because it changes from day to day.
So
Do we have any other questions?
The last question is...
Okay, one more question for today.
What are your thoughts on... It's gift-giving season, and what are your favorite gifts for gardeners?
Favorite gifts for gardeners? You know, if I had that... If you have a gardener that needs a tool, the Hori Horis is probably one of the most versatile tools that you can get. They call them different things in different places in different catalogs. But this is a Hori Hori knife. It can literally do just about anything. It's a curved, so it's a trowel. It's got a knife blade on the side. It's got a serrated cutting blade on the side. It's got a twined hook in the bottom. You could literally use this as your one tool. Hori, H-O-R-I, Hori Hori. You can get versions of this at Lee Valley, just about anywhere they sell good gardening tools. This one I picked up at one of my favorite places, Detroit Garden Works. And it's very well used, and I love it. The other one is probably not sitting right here, but Lee Valley makes what they call a root knife or an asparagus knife. It's a good basic, sort of a kitchen knife style knife with a curved blade and a serrated edge on the inner part of the curved blade. And I find that extremely valuable tool as well. That would be my go-to gift. If I had a gardener that didn't have one of these things yet, I would get them one. Otherwise, a good pair of secateurs or pruners. Look at the Felcos. I know they're pricey, but they will last you a lifetime as long as you don't lose them in the compost pile.
Not that
Another
anyone
great
would do
tool.
that.
Not that anybody would ever do that. I can't imagine. I'm sure I have 2 or 3 in the compost pile, 1 or 2 under trees planted in the garden somewhere, but that's just me. They'd be a great gift as well. Or good quality tools you just can't beat really well-made tools. You're going to pay for them, but you know, a $29 shovel not going to last you as long as that $129 shovel in most cases. So look for good quality. Have the gardener feel them out though. Tools are an interesting thing. Some tools I think, oh, that's a cool tool. Then I pick it up and it weighs 50 pounds and I'm like, I couldn't dig with this all day. So, or this is too short of a handle. There's lots of variations. You know, have the gardener try out a few first if you can. Good pair of gardening gloves can be a valuable item for sure. Anything like that, the gardener will appreciate. Absolutely. Any other questions today?
No, that's it.
That's it? All right. Our trips are filling up quickly. We've got 2 magnificent trips for next year. Chelsea Flower Show and some outstanding gardens. Many that I've never been to yet, so I'm really looking forward to it. The Chelsea Flower Show, of course, once in a lifetime opportunity to see the best garden show in the world. We've got very few spots left on our Highlands of Scotland tour for August. If you have any interest in these trips, email Marjorie at masonhousegardens.com. Show your interest, get your name on the list. They are selling out very, very quickly. And there's a great gift for a gardener too. Take them to see beautiful gardens around the world. You will come back rejuvenated and thoroughly inspired to create more beauty in your own garden. And with that, I'm getting a little cheesy, so we'll wrap it up for this week. We will see you next week on Let's Get Growing Facebook Live.